Welcome back, everyone. This week's episode, we're taking the frequently asked questions that you guys ask us on Instagram and spending a little bit more time diving deep into those answers. Unfortunately, with Instagram, we only get 60 seconds to respond to a lot of these questions. And truly, they take a lot more than 60 seconds to give you guys the information that you need to get your question answered properly. So this week, we're going to dive into those and give you guys the best answers possible. So, Jimmy, let's go ahead and look at the first one. The first one we're looking at is, so often people ask us, is this program right for me? And it's tough when we look at that Instagram stickers because we don't have too much context with that question, which a lot of these questions on social media can differ based off context. So what is the first thing someone wants to look for when they're looking to figure out if the program is right for them?
That's a good question. I get that commonly. I would say there's three top things for me: goals, equipment, and time. So goals, what are your goals and what are the goals of that program that you're looking into? You want to make sure those align, because if they don't align, you're not going to get what you need out of the program. Equipment, if you don't have what the program requires to execute the program, that program's not for you. Example, let's say you only have access to either body weight or bands, and the program you're trying to do is a heavy barbell-based program. That's probably not the one for you. And then the third one is time. Let's say you're very limited on the amount of time that you can train or days per week. If it's a 7-day or 6-day-a-week program with 6 days a week of lifting, and you can only commit to 3 days of lifting and maybe 2 to 3 of conditioning, then that 6-day-a-week strength plan is not for you. So those are my top three, I would say. Like I said, goals, equipment, and time. All those things play a huge role. So you want to make sure that aligns with whatever program you're going into.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the time one's huge because, again, somebody could have an absolute phenomenal program on paper, but if it doesn't fit their needs, then it's not a good program for that individual. Doesn't mean it's a bad program. It just doesn't work for that individual.
So as far as time, where it gets really important, like coming from college athletics, I think gives us like a good perception or like the ability to balance time out in a training session. Because in college, I know I only had most of the time like an hour long session, maybe an hour and a half. So I know how long roughly each session is going to take. So if I program a session that's supposed to be an hour and somebody's taking an hour and a half, 2 hours, they're not meeting the intent of the program because they're spending too much rest time. They're spending too much time on their phone or whatever the case may be. So just managing your time as well, because our programs shouldn't take you 2 to 3 hours to execute them. So that's something to consider as well. Like you don't need to be spending 2 hours in the weight room to get results. So
yeah, really, I feel like if you're spending an hour and a half to 2 hours, you're probably not training for performance. You're probably training like a bodybuilder where you're just doing this insane amount of volume. But to truly train for performance, like I think in most situations, right around an hour is kind of that sweet spot. Maybe go a little bit over if you're adding a little bit more mobility into a session because you have more time. But like just perfectly like how lunch pail is, where everything's packed in the session that you need, like you should be able to get what you need out of a performance training session in that 60 minutes. I'd say 9 times out of 10.
Agree. And then, yeah, and that's how I've gravitated towards training. Like if you look at a 5 or a 6 day week plan, I've talked about this before, but a lot of times there's a lot of fluff. Yeah, do people want to burn down some arms and do extra arm work? That's absolutely fine, but that's not like the foundation of the program. The foundation of the program is going to come between the racks. Like that's going to be the biggest thing is your squat variations, your bench variations, your pulls, your deadlifts, all those things are going to be the foundation. If you want to add a little bit of extra, that's fine, but it shouldn't take you an hour and a half, 2 hours to get through a training session.
No, yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting looking like as we mature in strength and conditioning, how like I remember growing up that like you couldn't miss Friday because Friday was buys and tries.
Yeah.
I couldn't tell you the last time I did an actual buys and tries. Actually, I can. I guess it still isn't even buys and tries. So there's a lot of times where I'll get what I need to in my training week. And then if maybe my schedule is a little different or something, like last time I was traveling, I had a hotel gym, but I had already completed all my sessions in the week. But since I was going to be, off my diet that weekend, I went and just did like a short run and then buys and tries in the hotel gym. So
yeah, I agree. I would say grip and neck is the new buys and tries. That's I'm putting that stamp. That should almost be on a t-shirt. So grip and
Hey,
neck.
we can put
Yeah,
we can
grip
put
and
it
neck
on
is
a
a
t-shirt
try.
for November this year.
Absolutely, that's a good call. That's a good
What
call.
was it that we said last week, or not last week? Last year was a thick neck is the new six pack or something like that.
Yeah, that and the best way to protect your neck is to lose it. So that's another good one.
That
So
is a good one
that's
because I
good.
always think about that picture that we put out there with the football player and his traps are literally just up there.
Exactly.
So nice little plug for whoever's new to us that Neckvember is coming up. So you're going to want to make sure you get on that program, and we
Absolutely.
will drop a T-shirt for that. So
And that's on
get ready.
Team Yoke is where I program that. So
Yeah. So if you don't want to wait for Neckvember, go ahead and hop on Team Yoke so you can go ahead and start to lose that neck and have what is now the new six pack.
exactly.
So cool. Jim, is there anything else we want to add to this first question right here? If someone's trying to figure out what's the right program for them.
No, honestly, that's the biggest thing. That's what I look at. Yeah. So I would say let's stick with those three.
Cool. So the next one is similar to this first one, but how often should someone look to change up their training program? And we can look at it in a couple different ways, whether they're changing it completely, which would obviously come with goals differing, or how often are they changing up, what movements they're doing into it.
Yeah, no, that's a good question. Well, constantly people need change and variety. And when you look at good training, it's simple movements executed really well for years on end, months, years, things like that. So in 2 to 4 weeks of a training program, you should start to see some sort of neurological adaptations for strength. So 2 to 4 weeks is where you'll usually see those strength adaptations to a new plan. And then longer term, like 8 to 12 weeks, is where you should start to see some sort of aesthetic results, some more muscle mass and or leaning down body fat, things like that. So let the program work. That's one of the biggest mistakes I see people make is just constantly up. I don't like this program. I'm not seeing results. I got to jump ship and I got to switch it up completely because if you're constantly going from, hey, I like goal, it kind of goes back and forth. It's goal hopping and program hopping. If 1 week you want to get really strong and then 2 weeks later you want to put on all this size, next week you want to train for a marathon, like you have to stick with something. We can train all qualities like we talked about at nauseum in the past, but just make sure, try to have a main goal. And then, so like 1 priority, 2 priority, 3 priority. So I'm trying to move the needle on strength. I'm still prioritizing some power work, some hypertrophy, and conditioning. But then that can change. But I would at least recommend about 12 weeks, sticking with a program for 12 weeks before you figure out if that program is for you or not. Sticking with a program for a week or two, you're not actually doing the program at that point. So 2 to 4 weeks, you can start to see some adaptations to strength. Longer term for aesthetics and things you'll see in the mirror, usually more longer term. So,
Yeah, and I like that you mentioned the goals there. That obviously that's going to differ how we're changing it. I saw something, I believe it was yesterday on Instagram, and I assume it was supposed to be a joke, just with how dumb it was. But it was like, couldn't decide if I wanted to be a bodybuilder, a CrossFitter, high roxer, marathon runner. So I decided to do all of them. And I'm just sitting here thinking, like, so if this isn't a joke, more likely you're just going to suck at all these things. Like, because you can't sit there and bodybuild, pack on all this muscle, and then expect to run marathons competitively. Like, we're just contradicting ourselves in our training. So, yeah.
and it just depends on if you're a high level athlete at that particular craft, you're going to have to go all in on that. Like bodybuilding is an art. Like it's an art, it's a craft. Like you have to go all in on it from nutrition to program design, things like that. Same thing with CrossFit. Like you have to go all in on it. You can't just kind of dip your foot in the water to test it out to see like if you say, "Oh, I'm doing a bodybuilding program," like why? Why are you doing that? Are you getting stage ready? Because there's a big difference between getting stage ready versus just wanting to put on size. Because I can tell you from over a decade of experience in college athletics that I didn't train my athletes to be bodybuilders, but guess what? After 12 to 18 weeks, whatever, they looked better just from good total body quality training and consistent training. So That's the biggest thing. So if you're not trying to be stage ready, total body definitely works for you. If you're not trying to be the high level like CrossFit athlete, like trying to be compete at whatever regionals and all those things, like just good, balanced, consistent training will go a long way. So don't program hop. That's one of the biggest mistakes that I see is just hopping from goal to goal to program to program. Like it's great to sign up for a high rocks. I think that's awesome. Anything, just sign up for anything and compete, but don't try to do high rocks and also train for a powerlifting meet in the same cycle. Like focus on at least one thing. So
Yeah, absolutely. And then kind of go back to it. We didn't, I talked about it from the lean muscle standpoint, trying to run a marathon if you're actually trying to get ready for bodybuilding. Think about just the dieting aspect of that. Like if you're at a part where you're trying to cut down to 3 to 5% body fat, so you're not eating any carbs, how the hell are you going to fuel for an endurance training session? Like it'd be absolutely miserable. Yeah. So pick what your goal is and give it time. Don't especially if we want to be competitive in these events, 12 weeks, unless you're just an absolute freak, 12 weeks is probably not enough time for you to train up and to be incredibly competitive in those events. Like,
correct.
There's people who never win bodybuilding competitions that I've seen that trained for years they would Thanksgiving still sticking to their bodybuilding diet, Christmas still sticking to it. And I saw them never win shows. They did well, but like, it's not something you just decide, hey, I'm going to do this. I'm going to go out and like give it a whirl. Like that's not going to be the case.
And we never get time back. So don't waste your time doing a program if you're not going to finish it through. We don't have any more time. That hourglass is ticking down. So pick a program and execute it. Don't waste a month or 2 weeks of doing one thing and then switching because you don't get that time back. So
yeah, absolutely. So yeah, using that time effectively. Then another thought on this topic is it kind of goes into our first one as well when we were talking about a program's right for you that you can adhere to. So I had somebody, this was outside of here, they were working with a different coach and they sent a message talking about like, hey, the program's not working for me. I'm going in the opposite direction with my weight goals, everything else. And then we looked at his training log and he's missing multiple sessions per week. And so this guy is talking to me on like, how are we saying this is the program, but he hasn't done a full week of training, but now saying, hey, we have to train it up or change it up.
And I'd imagine, I don't know the person, but I imagine, because I've seen it before, they're just picking and choosing things that they like and just doing those workouts, and they're not doing the workouts that they necessarily need to be doing. And that is very common. Like, how often do you see, oh, I really like lifting, but I don't like conditioning, so I'm going to skip all the conditioning in my program. Like, then you're not executing the actual program. Because, there's a reason why a coach put it there. It has a purpose. So if it's there, give it a go, follow it, as long as it's not injuring you, obviously, and things like that. But if you're not doing something just because you don't like it, you got to kind of look in the mirror. So.
And I believe you said it on one of our Instagram clips before that we filmed. You need to train your needs, not your wants. And that's truly where the discipline aspect of training comes in. Like, there's a lot of things that I'm sure you do in your training, I know I do in my training, that are not fun. Like today I did that simulated high rocks session you gave me a while back. Nothing about that is fun, but like,
and that's why it's nice having a coach too, because a coach is going to program things not like he's your best friend or thinking of things you'd like to do. He's programming the things that will get you to that end goal. And that's the benefit of having a coach. Like, even for myself, like, I know now, obviously I'm a coach. I've been doing it damn near 20 years. Like, that I know exercises that work in a program. I'm not going to avoid them, but the average person, they don't know. So having a coach is there to put those things in that you're not necessarily going to enjoy, but there's a purpose for that exercise or that thing to be in there.
Yeah, and I think you're much more likely to adhere to something when you see it. Like, if you're invested, maybe you invested money into that coach.
Yep.
If it's there, you're much more likely to do it there as opposed to like, hey, I know I hate this movement, but let me Like, unless you do have the discipline. Like, if you know you hate a movement, you're bad at it, putting it into your program, which you should, but it's easier said than done, isn't it? Like, I know, like, Nordics, I don't necessarily love them. So, like,
Of course. And
yeah.
again, the other benefit of having as a coach is like our job, and that's why I harp on this all the time, whether it's to young up and coming strength coaches or just justifying our existence. Like you got to practice what you preach as a coach, because I know for again early on in my career and still to this day, I've done every program through and through. So I know what works for me, what doesn't work, how it feels, how do my legs feel after this session? Would I be able to do a run afterwards? So we do all the groundwork of putting ourselves through the programs to make it easier on the client or on the team, because we practice what we preach and we pride ourselves on that. So if I never did anything, it's like a chef that doesn't try his own cooking. Like you gotta do it, you gotta try it. So
Or trusting a bartender who doesn't drink themselves.
that's a tricky one, but yeah, that's
Yeah. I will say, going back to your simulated high rocks training session that you gave me a while back, I had a couple people do it, or I had one person do it with me, and then another person saw us finishing it up. They wanted to then try it, and then I had another person come up to me like, we should record everybody's time to create the leaderboard up here on this specific workout. I'm like, dude, hell yeah, let's do that. I was like, let's actually make this a whole LPD where we have the whole team go out and run this.
yeah, no, absolutely.
I would get some nasty looks if I actually tried to enforce that one.
Yeah, and like you coming from college, like the team aspect. That's the another part, nice part about Lunch Pail, Warfighter, Team Yoke, all those things is like having the leaderboards on there, seeing who you're competing against. Yes, it's virtual, like you're not actually in person training with a team, but you can see somebody across the country, they hit a 405 squat for a set of 3. Like that gives you more incentive to add more weight to the bar. So there's definitely something to be said about that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I was actually thinking about that today. Is the one guy who completed after we did, his time was much closer to mine. I was like, dude, if you want to start like coming in and training with me, please do so, because that's going to push me even more when we have close times. And then started thinking about it from the sense of what's awesome with our training teams on Train Heroic is the people you surround yourself with are going to be able to push you. So like you just said, even if you're not in the actual same gym, but you're seeing that somebody put 4 or 5 up on this, like how often is that having somebody else try to push a little bit more of like, oh, if somebody else did it, I can try to get it, as opposed to like lay up and say 385 or something. Like being around those competitive individuals, whether it's in person, virtually, is only going to make you better, because now you're surrounding yourself with other individuals who want to be better themselves. And the same goes from the flip side of it. If you surround yourselves with people who don't care to get better, they're always going to make excuses. They're always going to bitch and moan. Like that, oftentimes that's going to wear off on you yourself.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And the other nice part about the app in general is metrics matter. Metrics matter. I can't stress that enough. Whether it's an app or a notebook, like I use the app, but I also have a notebook to record everything I do, because anytime my training goes off the path, it's because maybe I got a little sloppy. I didn't bring my notebook. I didn't record. So now I don't know what I hit the previous week, things like that. So record everything in the app, excuse me. And it makes it so much easier to move the needle every single week by recording every small detail, even if it's as simple as bumping up your warm-up sets. Like, all right, on bench press, you started 95 pounds week 1. On week 2, on that same warm-up set, throw 2.5s on. That's only 5 pounds in the grand scheme of things. But then when you add that up over rep upon rep, over week upon week, that's going to add up. That'll equal tons over time. So especially when you add it to every set on top of that. So that's really important. And same thing with the runs too. Like track your runs. What was the distance you covered in this interval time, as opposed to just going out. Let's say it's a 5-minute run interval, and you just go out and run it. Then you did that week 1, and then week 2 you did the same thing, but you're not competing against anything. You're not trying to beat anything. You don't feel as good, so you're not going to push as hard. Whereas if you have that metric, I got this far on week 1, I'm trying to beat that. No matter how bad I feel, that is the number I'm going to beat because I did it last week. So metrics matter. So record it on the app, write it down, whatever you got to do, but metrics matter.
Yeah, and I think it goes back to what we talked about a couple weeks ago about building some of these healthy habits for your life. Simple, but not easy. The getting in the habit of you recording everything is simple to do. It's not necessarily easy for you to remember to bring it, write it down every single time. But what it will do is when you start doing these training sessions more often, you're now taking a lot of the guesswork out of it. Like me and you've talked before about like not having a plan going in, then you're like, oh, I guess I'll do this, or maybe I'll do that. Like knowing exactly of like, oh, I had a dumbbell row of 4x8, I used 105. And so you know exactly whether you're progressing from that this week. It's not like, did I do 90, 95? Oh, I know exactly what it is. How much more effective can I be in my training program now? And then the other thing, like you talked about the runs, make sure you said log those. And I would also create those notes too, because settings for these runs are going to matter. Like, what did you sleep? What did your hydration look like? Temperature outside. If you have the technology to measure what your temperature was, record all that because that will affect that training session. And we're not saying, hey, let that be a cop out to not do the training session properly, but those things do matter. So create those notes, write down a line or two about how you felt during it. So that way you can compare and truly track your progress.
No, absolutely. Because even more so, unlike the assistance work too, like everybody wants to improve their squat, bench, and deadlift. But to your point, like a dumbbell row or a pull-up, like if you're doing max pull-ups, write down how many reps you got on pull-ups. So then that next week you're trying to beat it. And then 4, 8, and 12 weeks later, then you can actually look at the program to see, did I improve? Because that's also a way to get buy-in for yourself is like, all right, maybe you didn't improve your bench press, but your pull-ups went up, your single leg work went up. So the program still worked for you. It is very difficult to get every single exercise to move in the right direction at the same time. It's damn near impossible, but you got to take wins when you can get wins. So if you're improving in something, that's a positive because there's always going to be reasons why something doesn't move as much as the other. So I can't stress that enough is record everything. Don't just look at the app and then just do the workout. Make sure you look at the app, make sure you're recording every set so you take the guessing out of it for that following week and throughout the whole cycle.
Yeah, and absolutely. And you talked about goals, making sure we're improving in those categories that are going to get us closer to our goal. So I know that sounds obvious to say, but I'm going to say it.
Yeah, no, so. 100% agree. Yep.
Cool, Jimmy. So let's move on to the last one that we have for tonight. And this one is a question, might be one of the most frequently asked ones we get. And I think it's just in general one a lot of people don't understand. What is the best way for us to build our endurance without sacrificing too much strength? Yeah, or maybe sacrificing strength at all?
Yeah, it's definitely a juggling act. The number one recommendation I have is don't increase your volume too quickly and don't increase your intensity too quickly. So intensity for a run is obviously going to be the speed in which you run, and the volume is going to be the time or the distance that you travel. So don't go from doing 0 miles a week or 5 miles a week of running to all of a sudden you're doing 20 miles out of nowhere. That's a massive increase in volume, and it's going to have a detrimental effect on your strength work. Whereas if you slowly move the dirt and move the volume to the right to increase the volume over time, we usually use the 10% rule, 10% volume increases every week. So just an example, if you're doing, let's say 10 miles a week of running, you're going to add 1 extra mile the following week. So week 2, you hit 11 miles. Week 3, you hit 12 miles, and just slowly move the dirt. Or if you prefer time-based progressions, if you're doing 100 minutes a week of conditioning, and I'm just talking about cumulative for the whole week, add 10 minutes to your total week volume. So instead of doing 100 week 1, week 2, you're doing 110. Week 3, you're doing 120, and just keep moving the needle. Obviously, then deload every couple of weeks. Depends on what your goal is, on how much time you want to spend on speed. But if you're just trying to build just general endurance, I would just say keep the strength work the same, follow the same program that you're following, but slowly add in the conditioning to your plan. So it's not, oh, I'm doing high volume, 10 sets of 10 squat, plus I'm adding 30 miles of running onto my program. Something's got to give. You can't get, I'm sure there's people out there, I've said this before, can't get like 2 to 3 doctorates at the same time. So it's the same thing with your body as well for strength training, conditioning, all those things. So have, like I touched on earlier, have that main goal, but you can still prioritize other things. It's just not going to be your number one priority. So if your number one priority is building out your mileage for conditioning, all right, that's your number one priority. Your secondary priority is strength. Doesn't mean you're neglecting strength, but you want to maybe pull back on the volume, meaning like, all right, instead of sets of 10, I'm doing sets of 1 to 5 repetitions. You can still keep the strength, like the intensity high, meaning like how much weight is on the bar, relatively high. But I wouldn't do a ton of volume in the weight room if you're also doing a ton of volume with conditioning. So it's the same way as I would train athletes in college. When we got into season with athletes, you could still get stronger. Like a lot of times, like the biggest misconception, whether it was players, coaches, whoever, is, oh, once we go into season, we got to go into maintenance. Like, no, we're not going into maintenance. We're still trying to get stronger, but we're going to reduce the volume in which we do so. Well, it's the same with conditioning. You're not adding practice and games to your schedule, but you're adding more volume of running. The same way as if you added more volume of practice and games, that's more conditioning volume. So you have to account for that in your strength work. So that's my best recommendation to people is just, you can absolutely do it. Just slowly add it into your program. And I would say if you're coming off the couch, I'm happy that you're getting into conditioning. You don't have to go right into running. It could be easy pace conditioning, or it could be low impact cardio. It could be hopping on a bike and just building up some volume of zone 2 work, and just adding that up over time. So that would be my number one recommendation for people. Don't progress too fast, and you'll be fine.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's a few things I want to touch on in that. So when we talk about endurance and then strength as well, lift and strength rep ranges. So how often do you hear somebody, and again, people don't know, they don't know, but how often do you hear somebody talk about like, oh, well, I'm focusing on endurance, and then they're doing 4x12 in a compound movement? Like, get stronger, because our body needs to get stronger. Still work in things like cleans, get those power movements in there, because we need to be powerful. We need to be strong. Just because we're doing endurance doesn't mean that our resistance training has to match an endurance style resistance workout. So be strong, be powerful, and then make sure we're working that volume appropriately. So a lot of times too, like Jimmy talked about, if you're doing five miles a week, don't jump to 20. So you might get away with it for 1 week. Maybe you don't feel it if you're pretty durable yourself, grew up playing sports, whatever else, you might get away with it for 1 week, not following that 10% rule. But if we continue to just stack weeks on top of each other, falling outside of that 10% rule, we're just asking ourselves, or we're inviting ourselves to get injured because we're trying to do too much too quickly. Maybe we're trying to make up for lost time in that. And then I think
Sorry, just to piggyback on that as well, Ben. Anybody listening to this, reflect back on your own training. If that resonates with you, like, oh yeah, I went from like 5 miles a week, and especially if military, police, fire, all those things, sometimes you have to do what you got to do, whether it's an unplanned PT session and you got to go out for a long ruck or run, whatever, that will happen. But if that continuously happens, that's when you're going to see some overuse injuries. That's where you're going to see maybe some plantar fasciitis, some shin splints, things like that. So we're trying to mitigate that. And that's why we're really trying to hammer home slow cooking this process. So as I've said before, you could always put a steak back on the grill, but once you burn that steak, that thing is done. So same thing with your body. Once you're depleted and you're in a hole and you're not recovered, the damage is already done. So slowly build up when you have the opportunity to control your own situation.
Yeah, and then the other thing, when we look at staying healthy while we increase our running, look at the number of hard sessions you have per week. If you're brand new to it, you don't need to do 3 running sessions that week that are considered hard running sessions. When I consider hard, I'm thinking of the interval style, maybe pretty fast fartleks. Like, you do not need to have 3 of those a week because, again, maybe your body withstands it early on, but it's going to break down if we continue to have all these hard sessions in 1 week. Generally, I'd say most people are good with 1, maybe 2 if you're a little bit more durable. Would you agree with that, Jimmy?
Yep. Yeah, I agree. Yep.
And then, so take it slow, like Jimmy said. Don't try and do too much too quickly with it. And then, Jimmy, the question I had for you, so I've actually been wanting to bring this up with you. We oftentimes talk about the 10% rule, and it's obviously not 10% doesn't have to be written in stone.
Yep.
Will you differ that based off intensity too? So if we were to take like sprint work versus our tempo pace, are you now more conservative with that 10% on a sprint work, or how are you looking at that?
Yeah, I'm definitely more concerned. I'd rather slowly move the volume of my, let's call it the 3-day split, let's say. So you have, for argument's sake, you have 1 day of tempo work or threshold higher heart rate work, and then the other 2 days are zone 2. I'd rather, you have 2 options. You can keep the volume the same and then increase the intensity of that threshold, or you could increase volume of the zone 2 or the slow pace conditioning and then just maintain that threshold run and just try to get more efficient at that threshold work while you're building out that zone 2. So you got a couple different options there, but I'm definitely more conservative with the faster pace runs because, again, it's harder on the system, it's harder on the body, things like that. So with the zone, you're really trying to increase your total volume, but I would err on the total volume coming from your easy pace conditioning work. I'd be curious your thoughts there, Ben.
No, yeah, absolutely, completely agree with that. So
cool. And then
cool. Jimmy,
one last thing I want to touch on. So just because a lot of times people come off injury or come off like a time where they just missed some training for a month or whatever, for whatever reason. One thing we used to follow in college was the 50, 30, 20, 10 full kind of progression. I don't know if you had to do that in college, but a 50% volume reduction of your previous highest volume. So whatever that is. So let's say it was, I got up to a 60-minute run. All right. You'd cut that in half. That would be your 50%. And then, so that would be your first session back, like just easing back into it. So that was just one thing, like progression wise, 50, 30, 20, 10, and then you're back into it. And that's a progression back to full. So another important thing for not just people wanting to increase their volume, but also people coming off injury, just always err on the side of reducing volume and then slowly building back to full. So.
No, yeah, I really like that because obviously we see so many people get re-injured because, hey, I was doing this before I got hurt. Now you try and do that too quickly. Correct. And then now we're getting further away from our goals. We've always said it. I know we've said it on here before that we never want to get an athlete injured with us. We always want to make sure that they're progressing to their goals. And if we're getting them injured, they're obviously regressing.
Correct. And that 50, 30, 20, 10 reduction. So by the time you're at week 5, depending on the injury, obviously. So if it was a 9-month to a year recovery, that kind of is out the window. I'm just talking about a little bit more short-term type injuries or breaks from training. But yeah, so that's the biggest thing. So in 5 weeks, you should be in a better position physically than you were 5 weeks before if you follow a smooth progression back to training.
No, yeah, absolutely. I really like that 50, 30, 20, 10. It's easy to just think about. Like it takes a lot of the guesswork out, right?
Correct. Correct.
Awesome.
Yep.
Well, guys, that's our episode for this week. If there's any questions that we did not answer that you guys want us to touch on, make sure to drop those in the comments. And then if you're interested in training with our team, whether that's on Warfighter, Lunch Pail, or maybe one-on-one training, make sure to check out the links in the description. Appreciate you guys being with us. See you back next week.
Thanks, Ben. Appreciate it.